Day. Afterwards, grab a cuppa and get to know us a little better. We've been in this series called 10 Steps to Freedom, and it's about the 10 Commandments. Now, you might be surprised. I need to be able to click under. I can't at this moment. Hey, there we go. So we've been saying that the 10 Commandments, contrary to popular opinion, are not a heavy weight, are not a killjoy. That's not the intention of the commandments at all. In fact, 1 John 5 in our New Testament says they are not a burden to us, the commandments. They're not a burden. They're actually designed to set us free. And we see in Exodus 20 where the 10 Commandments are given, the chapter starts with, I am the Lord your God who took you out of slavery. So this whole discussion is in the context of freedom and liberty, not binding people up and taking away their joy or their liberty. So today we're up to step 6 and 7, and it's avoiding selfless acts. And yes, I am trying to cram 2 steps into one day because Christmas is coming. Christmas is coming. The end of the year is normally here, and we're running out of weeks. So you're getting 2 for the price of 1 today. Murder and adultery all rolled into one. We're approaching our Bible reading a little different today. We'll start in Exodus 20, but we're going to move over to the New Testament because Exodus 20 actually has little to say about these. The 2 only get 9 words between them. So step 5 gets, you shall not commit adultery. And that was step 7. Step 6 is you shall not murder. And step 7, you shall not commit adultery. So 9 words between the 2. So light on words, but don't be fooled. Maybe here is the weightiest material of all in the whole of the 10 Commandments. Toss these 2 aside at your own peril. There is plenty of weight in these 2 steps. And these steps captured the attention of Jesus. Last week, when we considered the Sabbath day, we noted that in the New Testament, that pretty much gets repeated word for word in Ephesians 6. It doesn't get adjusted or changed at all. But here is very, very different. Jesus has plenty to say about these in Matthew chapter 5. And in Matthew 5, what he does is he takes what were considered external actions and makes them internal, makes them all about the heart. He says, you have heard it said, but I say, and he brings it back to the heart, and we're going to see that in a second. And why does he do that? Why does Jesus reinterpret these? Why does he have so much to say about these? Because first century Israel had the same problem you and I do today. Over time, we lose sight of the why, the reason behind we do things, and we start going through the motions, and they lose their punch. And so Jesus, for this reason, kind of snaps these first century listeners out of their slumber, and I think you're going to find the same for you today. He takes what were considered outward things and makes them matters of the heart. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20, and we're just going to read a couple of verses there, and then we're going to go to Matthew 5 today. God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And jumping down to verse 13, you shall not murder. So here's step 6. Step 7, you shall not commit adultery. And then we go over to Matthew chapter 5. And it begins with the words, you have heard it said. What does that mean? Well, it reflects the listeners. These are people that knew it all. They're very, very familiar with the law. They're religious people, educated people. There's nothing newsworthy here for them. They knew this backwards. They were people who thought they were right with God, who thought they were experts in Jewish law. They felt they complied with all of the 10 Commandments, and yet here they get their socks blown off. You have heard it said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, who's answerable to the court, anyone who says you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering a gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? Just sort of dropping your offering midway down the aisle. Because there's something more important. First, go and be reconciled, and then you can come and offer your gift. Verse 25, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. Now, remember I said everybody under the sound of Jesus' voice this day knew the commandments backwards. So by this time, George, who's sitting next to you in church, is snoring like a steam train because none of this applies to him. He's been married to Betty for 47 years. He's never slept with anybody else. Wake up, George. Try this. I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully, verse 28, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. For it's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. And we ask that the Lord will add his blessing to the reading of his holy word. Let's go backwards in order to go forwards. Why was murder, why was adultery a problem in the first place? What's wrong with murder? We only get in page 4 of the history book and we find the first homicide takes place. Brother slays brother. Cain kills Abel. Was it okay? Well, apparently not. God quickly appears on the scene and pronounces this strong judgment for Cain. But I feel a bit sorry for Cain. I mean, who told him? Who told him that it was wrong? How was he to know? How was Cain to know that caning his brother was wrong? Thank you. I thought my reaction mightn't be enough from you. The 10 Commandments aren't given at this point in time. So how is Cain supposed to know that there was anything wrong with murder? He had nothing. He had nothing to go by. He's just 4 pages into the history book of the world, and he strikes this problem. He's annoyed at his brother. There's a jealousy issue there. But he hasn't had this biblical ethics lesson to know that murder was wrong, right? Well, I'm not so sure. I think as we go to Genesis 4, there's a few words there that give a clue that Cain knew. Now, Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And on it goes. Do those few words that I've underlined give you a clue? Whoops. Let's go, the highlight, let's go out to the field. Let's go out to the field. Does that give you a clue? That Cain knew that this wasn't something to perform in the family lounge room. That he knew that he had to get away to an isolated place in order to enact a murder. There was something in him that understood it was wrong to take the life of somebody else. Cain comprehended that to engage in manslaughter, he had to get away and do it privately. And I suspect Cain would have kept it his little dirty secret had God not appeared on the scene and interrupted that. I can imagine Cain arriving home that night and Mum saying, have you seen Abel? I haven't seen him all day. And Cain says, funny you mention that. Me neither. I wonder where he could be. And he would have lived happily ever after. But not so. Not so. God pronounces this horrible judgment on Cain. These final words on the screen there. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Here's what we now know because of the insight of step 6. God has declared human life sacred. You might be tempted to say, John, tell me something I don't already know. I mean, that's so old. Well, is it? I mean, isn't that what the evolutionary viewpoint is trying to undermine in our world today? That your life is really just time plus chance plus matter? So is there anything special about it? Is there anything valuable about human life? Well, not really. We're just a random chance of nature. We're an accident. Is it just survival of the fittest, or is it that everybody has value because they're created in the image of God? Well, that's the Christian worldview. Life is sacred because we're created in the image of God. It's funny to me that in the postmodern world we keep hearing there's no absolutes anymore. I mean, everyone can just do whatever they feel like. There's no right or wrong. You decide what works for you. Okay, so you don't mind if I hire a hitman and take out your family then? Well, of course I mind. That would be wrong. Well, hang on, a moment ago you said nothing. There was no absolutes. Now all of a sudden I've struck one. That didn't take long. When we take God out of the equation, there aren't absolutes. But that would be to play God, and we don't have that role. God makes the calls, and he says human life is sacred. Now, I know some of you love your animals. Your cat is very, very special to you. To you. Animals are not made in the image of God. This is something that's specifically a human trait. That's not to say animals don't have any value, but if you like hunting, the Bible allows you to hunt, especially if you're killing off pests. I mean, go for it. But there's nothing in Scripture that forbids the killing of an animal, but there is for the killing of a human life. Murder is wrong because God has declared human life sacred. In our New Testament reading, where the audience sat proudly while Jesus spoke, Jesus essentially says this: murder is seeded by unresolved anger. And about this time, we need to give George another dig in the ribs and say, hey, mate, wake up. This applies to you. This applies to you. We haven't got time this morning to delve deep into anger. I'd love to, but just some quick points in passing. Angry with your brother, which is what Jesus was referring to here, is very, very, very different to being angry about something your brother did. Notice Jesus was addressing here angry with a person versus angry with a problem, something that the person did. So there's different types of anger. Some are okay, some are clearly not. Another thing to note, getting angry is different to staying angry. Getting angry isn't the problem. It's what we do with it. If we just take it inside and let it become bitterness and resentment over time, it's very unchristian. But it's not unchristian to be angry. It's what we do with it that determines whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. Here's what happens when we don't deal with anger well. It ends up coming to live in here. And when we keep it inside, it really does damage big time. But anger is such a powerful force that if we hold it in, over time, it bears fruit. It starts bearing fruit here, in the mouth, in your words that you speak about the person. See, when we stop talking to someone, we start talking about that person, right? When you stop talking to a person, you start talking about the person. And this is really problematic. And Jesus says here, you can murder with your mouth. Be careful. Anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. Anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Can I just say, I get amazed at the way people talk about our politicians. Have you read this verse? I mean, Be angry at the problem, yes, but be careful about giving honour to the person, which we talked about last week. To call someone raka expresses contempt for their intelligence. It's pretty much an Aussie version of blockhead or numbskull. It's almost untranslatable in the English language, though, because it's the tone in which you say the word that makes it mean or not. Fool is even worse, and Jesus drags in the biggest threat of all for someone who calls someone else a fool, hell itself. Talk about turn up the heat. Jesus not only does that with murder, though, he does the same for step 7, adultery. Adultery. He reinterprets this for us as well and really turns up the heat. Adultery is what? Having soulish or sexual relationships with someone other than your spouse. Now, you might be surprised as you look at the screen and says, soulish? What does that mean? Well, an affair doesn't have to be physical to do harm. Affairs can be emotional. And we invite destruction in when we give our heart to someone other than our spouse in marriage. There's a deep connection at work, let's say, that just builds day by day by day by day by day, that actually has a real power to do damage just the same as a physical one-night stand does. Just to be clear, both are to be avoided. Marriage is exclusive for husband and wife. Their connection is to be unrivaled by every other relationship. The day I stood and made my vow to Yvonne, here's what I did. I said no to all other options. Marriage is exclusively for one. God brought to Adam Eve. He didn't say, well, here's Betty as a option B in case you get tired of her. No, he didn't do that. And neither did he bring to Eve Frank, just in case Adam didn't really work out for her. No. He put one man and one woman together. We hear this when we hear the Bible talk about sex, and we think, oh, God's just a big killjoy. No, he isn't. Who thought this up? Who brought Adam a naked woman? Hello? God's into this. God is not against sex. He invented it. He thought it up. He created the idea. But he didn't bring Adam 72 virgins. He brought him one. I recall a workmate some time back telling me, don't think Donovan, this is my retail days. Sorry, Donovan. He's not here to defend himself. Could say anything today. No, so many years ago, this workmate said to me, and to a few of us, and he was saying it as kind of like a proud moment that look at how far he's come. He said, my wife and I now, we have an open marriage. Okay. Been married about 10 years. He had 3 kids by this stage. And he said, we've decided to make our marriage open. Now, here's what open meant. The weekdays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, through to Friday, they played responsible family. They looked after their kids. They did all the things that a committed married couple would do. But the weekends, baby, they were open slather. He went one way, she went the other. No questions asked. Their marriage was open. Well, guess what? Their marriage went from open to over in just a few months. He thought this was the best thing since sliced bread. We're going to open marriage now. And he's saying it to the rest of us like, you should try this thing. It's amazing. Well, it wasn't. I mean, you can't maintain trust in that sort of a scenario. And within months, if not weeks, their marriage was over. Open is not sustainable. It's not God's ideal. They thought it was a step of liberation. They thought they were stepping into freedom, but they actually found they were stepping into destruction. Their marriage blew apart quickly after becoming open. An open marriage is a choice to abolish a marriage. God designed sex to be the glue that holds couples together. And you've seen, when you have a sticker where the first time you put it on, it sticks really well, but then you tear it off and you stick it to another person, then you tear it off them and stick it to another person, you tear it off them and stick it to another person. After like 6 or 7 times of doing that, what happens to that sticker? It doesn't work anymore. It falls off. It doesn't connect in the way it was supposed to connect. And this is how sex works in God's economy. It's designed to hold a couple together in their marriage. But if you be willy-nilly with it, whoops, wrong choice of words. If you be careless with it, it will stop sticking after a while. Can I just say this? Given that we're in an internet age now, if you're thinking that porn will somehow enhance your relationship, whether you're unmarried at this point in time and you're thinking, I need to get educated. I don't know how sex works, so I need to watch some stuff so I can learn. It's like drinking methylated spirits to cure thirst. Porn is a killer. It might have a nice buzz on the way past your throat, but trust me, it's not doing you good. Guys, if you're watching it, thinking that one day it'll enhance your marriage, or even married now and you're thinking it's enhancing your marriage, I have one word for you: stop. And girls, same for you. If you're watching porn now, looking forward to your marriage, or even in a marriage, or as couples, you're diminishing the sticker. Same thing with porn. It'll get to the stage where you can't be attracted to the one that God has given you. And that's a horrible day. Watching pornography means you're not thinking of your spouse. Why else would you need it otherwise? It's killing your marriage. It's killing your capacity to have a good marriage. God has made the human heart with only enough room for one true love. Competitors are not allowed in, including screens. Do not commit adultery, God says. It's a senseless act. Stay away from it. It'll put you in a world of hurt. And God declares marriage sacred, just like he does human life. He cannot bless a marriage that goes beyond the two people in it. Marriage is not only a convenience. Marriage is not only a commitment. Marriage is a covenant. Marriage is a covenant. It's a vow that two people take to, where two become one, and God puts his stamp of approval on that marriage. And he's not out to limit our freedom. He's actually to enhance our freedom, because sex is such a powerful tool that it's designed to link together a couple in marriage. An open marriage is a dead marriage. And I guarantee if we circled the room today and asked some couples who have been married long term, 30, 40, 50 years, I don't think for a minute one of them would put up their hand and say, oh, yeah, I wish I'd slept around more when I was younger. We might hear some of the opposite story to that, but we wouldn't be hearing that story. Never ever do we regret following God's boundaries. I looked this week into recent research in Australia. Why are marriages breaking down? I'll give you one guess. Yell it out. What's your guess why are marriages breaking down in Australia? Adultery. Adultery is why. What I was more interested in finding out is why adultery is happening. And this is what I found. 52% of men said they felt emotionally disconnected from their wife. A high percentage. Higher percentage of women, but all you women who think blokes don't have feelings, we're not far behind you. 60%. Oh, sorry, no, that's the other way around, isn't it? 52% men, 60% female. So we're not far behind you in that response to say that's actually a thing that happens where couples begin to drift apart. And the second thing, feeling unappreciated. Second highest reason given why adultery happens, why people end up sleeping with others that they're not married to. If you're married today, you should look at that board and have a discussion with your spouse when you get home tonight. And rate yourself. How are we going with emotional connection? And if it's poor, do something about it, because you're on a slippery slope if you don't. How are we going with showing appreciation towards one another? Let this fuel a discussion that can save your marriage. This is the reason Australians are committing adultery today. This is the most recent studies in our nation. I find it fascinating that this so well links with Jesus' comments about the heart in Matthew 5, right? When he's talking about sexuality. I mean, I imagine that before I put this study up and I ask why are people committing adultery, okay, because they feel the need physically, but actually it's far deeper than that, isn't it? It's heart issues. It's heart issues that lead to adultery. So Jesus is right spot on by speaking about the heart when it comes to our sexuality. Our heart is the key thing. There's others in the room that require a stronger word today. You're already playing with this. You're already a long way down the track with someone that you're not married to. You're playing with sexual sin. You say, Jono, don't get all serious on me. We're not under the blankets. Well, hang on, it doesn't say you need to be. If an emotional connection's forming, it's a problem. It's a big problem. And you need to take drastic action if that's your trajectory. If you're heading there where your workmate and you are expressing more appreciation or have a stronger connection even than with your spouse. Now, I get that there's different personality types in all of this, but sometimes we need to just put a guard in there. Go, no, I cannot go to coffee this week. Doesn't work. And you know why. Because there's things building up here that are heading down a downward spiral. When Joseph, a good guy in the Old Testament, has his boss raise her eyebrows at him, he runs a mile. He doesn't flirt with the idea, he fled the scene. And that's the only thing you can do with temptation. Some commentators have said you've got 3 seconds to respond when the moment of temptation comes. Not many of us are going to get that right. Just 3 seconds. When that temptation hits, to respond well. So we need to take steps now. Don't wait till you're in a parked car at 11 o'clock at night in an isolated spot to go, I wonder what my sexual boundaries are. That's why Craig Groeschel's comment is so relevant. Why fight a temptation tomorrow that can be eliminated today? Why fight a temptation tomorrow that can be eliminated today? So whether you're married or not, what lines do you need to draw today? What compromising is starting to slip in? Whether it be online, whether it be at sport, whether it be at school, wherever it is for you, where is temptation creeping up? And if you're honest, you'll admit it. You know there's something there. And you'd be wise to run away before it's too late. Jesus' language here about how we deal with temptation, it's crude, isn't it? It's crude. If your arm causes you to sin, chop it off. If your eye causes you to sin, cut it out. Gouge it out. What's he talking about? You know, we'd have people everywhere in wheelchairs if we took this seriously, right? We have guide dogs galore this morning, bumping into each other on the way out, if we took these commands seriously. So what does Jesus mean? He means take sin seriously. Because particularly in this area of sexual sin, here's what happens if you engage in it. You curse yourself. The Bible says, so 1 Corinthians 6, flee sexual immorality. This is a powerful sin. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. That would be a crazy thing to do. Sex is designed to be a strong attachment, so strong it's reserved for husband and wife. Step 7 to freedom, don't sleep around. It'll do you a lot of harm. So where to from here? Because we fail in these matters, don't we? We're going to move into communion as we close out today. And I imagine there's some people in the room thinking right about now, communion at a time like this? I mean, I'm in the middle of a mess. I mean, I've made lots of mistakes in these areas. How could I possibly be worthy of the body and blood of Christ? Well, you're not. Neither am I. It's His grace that reaches down to us and lifts us up and makes us worthy. I love this picture where we mark up our lives, don't we? We continue to move outside the lines and draw new ones and make a mess. And Jesus, in His wonderful grace and mercy, gives us a fresh start. Gives us a fresh start. He says, no condemnation for those in Christ. Conviction, yes, but not condemnation. God doesn't deal condemnation. So if this morning, at this very point, you're feeling condemnation, then you can dismiss that and go, well, that's not God speaking, because God doesn't deal with condemnation. And you can partake in communion again this morning and be reminded of His grace. So I'm going to invite Ricky forward and the ushers to distribute communion. And we'll move into that now as we give thanks again for the amazing grace of God.